Welcome back, beautiful tri-state area. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Welcome back to the Polished Beauty segment, where we break down the science behind beauty, wellness, and confidence. Today's conversation is one that will resonate with millions of women navigating a stage of life that's often misunderstood: perimenopause and menopause. Today, we're chatting metabolism, menopause, and muscle, the science of aging gracefully. Now, we hear about the hot flashes, the mood swings, and the weight gain, but what's really happening inside our bodies? That's the question. More importantly, how can we take control of our metabolism, our body composition, and overall well-being during this particular phase? Joining us to break down the science behind muscle retention, fat loss, and the hormonal shifts that impact our bodies during menopause and perimenopause is a true expert in the field, Dr. Bill Campbell. He's a professor and director of the Performance and Physique Enhancement Laboratory at the University of South Florida. He spent decades researching how we can optimize our body composition through evidence-based nutrition and exercise. His work focuses on high-protein diets, diet breaks, and muscle-building strategies, particularly in women going through hormonal changes. And of course, I'm joined by my brilliant contributor for this segment, Dr. Daisy Ayim. She's a triple board certified cosmetic surgeon and OBGYN and founder of the Polished Beauty podcast. She brings a wealth of knowledge on women's health, aesthetics, and wellness, making her the perfect co-contributor for today's discussion. Welcoming now to the show are Dr. Bill and Dr. Daisy. Thanks for joining me, superstars.
Well, thank you. And Dr. Campbell, I can't wait to hear your brilliant contribution to this topic.
Yeah, I'm very more passionate than I've been about anything in my career to go into this space. So I'm ready to go.
Wow, that's a huge endorsement. So let's chat. Let's dive right in. The impact of menopause on metabolism. It's no secret that menopause brings unwanted weight gain, particularly around the midsection. And according to research, women can gain an average of 5 to 8% of their body weight during menopause, maybe even more, due to hormonal changes and a natural decline in muscle mass. But what's frustrating is that many women feel like they're doing everything right, eating well, exercising, and just still struggling to see results. Now, Dr. Bill, you've studied this extensively. What exactly is happening to a woman's body during menopause, and why does fat seem to shift so dramatically to the abdominal area?
Yeah, so two things are happening. One is hormonal. So two hormones that are really at play here. Estrogen, estradiol, starts to go down in about 2 years. I like to refer to a menopause transition, which is about a 4-year period going from pre to post menopause. So during these 4 years, what we have is estrogen levels going down and FSH, follicle stimulating hormone levels, going up. So that's what's going on hormonally. And then along with that, two body composition changes that are highly relevant. One, for the first time in a female's life, she starts to lose muscle tissue. Up until this point, she's gaining a little bit of muscle tissue each year. So there's one big change. And then the other change is there's an inflection point of gaining body fat around this menopause transition as well. And women are gaining some body fat going into 30s, 40s, but during this menopause transition, there's an inflection point where the rate of body fat gain starts to really increase. And the news gets a little bit worse. The gain in body fat is not uniformly distributed, as you mentioned. We actually have a redistribution of fat where they're gaining more fat in the abdominal region, more so than in the lower body.
Ugh. Ugh.
Heavy.
But it's validating to hear. And I think a lot of women assume they're failing at weight management, but really it's their physiology changing. And the fact that muscle retention plays such a key role is also a game changer.
Yeah, that's actually well documented, like you mentioned. And a lot of women struggle during that time. Professor, do you have any specific types of training resistant exercise that you recommend for women going through this period of time?
The best thing one can do is resistance train. It provides an anabolic stimulus to the body. So what I recommend is to lift with relatively heavy weights. And let me just explain. I use something called the pink dumbbell example. I'm shaming pink dumbbells, by the way, so be prepared. When you if you pick up a weight or you go to lift a weight and you can lift it more than 20 times, that weight is too light. So the most important thing that you do when you're lifting weights is to choose a weight with the appropriate amount of effort and that weight is relatively heavy. So I recommend that most of your lifting sets, you choose a weight that you can lift between approximately 6 and 12 times. Now, sometimes you'll choose weights that are heavier, particularly if you're able to squat and deadlift and bench press. Sometimes you'll choose weights that allow you to do more than 12 repetitions. But the sweet spot is choosing weights that you can do between 6 and 12 times, and you can't do it more than that. So lifting with relatively heavy weights to where you really can't do another repetition or two is the fundamental resistance training principles that I like to educate people on.
That's good. I mean, I totally agree with that, because women generally tend to be concerned that lifting heavy weights, they'll get bulky. And I think it's always good, at least I reassure them that no, you have to try really hard to look like Miss Olympia. So I'm glad you
Yes.
I'm glad you reiterate that.
Yeah.
Professor, you're such a big advocate on creatine supplementation, especially for women, which I think is wonderful. Can you explain how creatine benefits menopausal women specifically?
Yeah, so there's one area we know its benefits on muscle building. So that's documented across the lifespan, young males and females. But specifically to females, one of the unfortunate attributes of going through menopause is a significant increased risk for osteoporosis. And scientists will typically measure two areas. They'll look at the low back, so the lower spine, and the hip region. And we have several studies in women going through menopause that creatine supplementation is able to help preserve bone mineral density in the hip, specifically the femoral neck, so just this big bone in your hip. They're still losing bone mineral density, but they're losing significantly less when they're supplementing with creatine. So creatine has muscle benefits, and specific to this phase of life, it also helps preserve bone mineral density, which is exactly what we need.
Okay, that makes so much sense, and it fits perfect with my next question because I want to talk about protein and menopausal women, right? So protein is often seen as a bodybuilder's nutrient, but the truth is it's one of the most critical macronutrients for women over 40, and even the studies suggest that menopausal women, even perimenopausal women, actually need more protein than younger adults to support muscle maintenance and recovery. Now, in your research, what have you found to be the optimal protein intake for menopausal? But I actually want to also address the perimenopausal women trying to maintain or even just improve body composition.
Yeah, so I refer to protein as the menopause nutrient. Why do I do that? Well, three main reasons. One, we already discussed. For the first time, women are starting to lose muscle. What does protein do? It builds muscle. The second reason is because we know that most women do not consume enough protein. Now, that's generally true across the life stage, but particularly during menopause, women get about half of what they need. So it helps build muscle. We know they're not getting enough. We know they're not getting enough protein in their diet. And the third reason is it also helps reduce body fat. Now, this is only true if you're previously deficient or not eating enough protein and you take it to optimal levels. So this gaining of body fat can actually be addressed when you optimize protein.
So, piggybacking off that, diet breaks and metabolic adaptation, because it kind of goes hand in glove with what you're saying, right? A lot of women go into these extreme calorie restriction when they start gaining weight, but only to hit like this plateau and feel even more frustrated. So, your research on diet breaks challenges the idea that constant restriction is the best way to lose weight. Can you explain how structured diet breaks can actually help menopausal women with long-term fat loss without wrecking their metabolism?
Yeah, so just to be clear, my research on diet breaks was always in younger people, but I don't think that changes the principles of applying that research to a midlife woman. So the one thing about dieting it is a catabolic process. So everything about a diet is breaking down, which is good for body fat, but this catabolic environment is not good for muscle mass. So when we take a diet break, what we're doing is saying, hey, stop dieting for a period of time. Typically it's 7 to 14 days. And what we're doing is a couple things. We're bringing the body out of a catabolic environment and now into a potentially anabolic environment. Because we're going back to pre-dieting maintenance calories, we don't have to be concerned about gaining body fat when we take a diet break, but it really allows the body to recover. And then when we go back to dieting, we have more motivation and will respond better. So my research specifically has reported that diet breaks, or some people call them refeeds, they help with hunger, the psychology of hunger. So they don't have as high of a drive to eat when they incorporate these. And we've been able to maintain muscle mass and metabolic rate from being suppressed or getting lowered during these very long-term consistent diets.
Wow. So giving the body these breaks can actually help prevent metabolic slowdowns. That's a total mindset shift. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. Aside from protein and creatine, are there any other supplements that menopausal women should consider for fat loss, muscle maintenance, overall health? Supplementation is a big deal. So do you have any others?
Yeah, I think fish oil would be one, unless somebody's naturally eating a lot of fish. So that just helps optimize omega-3 levels. I also recommend multivitamin, multi-mineral supplement. Other than those two things, I don't really. And again, I spent my whole career studying dietary supplements relative to building muscle and losing fat. I don't have a lengthy list of things that are going to move the needle as much as creatine and protein. So those are the heavy hitters, so to speak.
I like that you touch on that because I call it the supplement culture. It's huge. So you have women taking 10, 15 tablets a day. And yes, there's some discussion about it, which is important, but I'm glad you really just focus to the core ones, because I think you can get caught up and end up taking so many pills that you really don't see the benefit.
Yeah, and I just thinking of my wife, she's talking like she's been in exactly that. Like as she says, I can't stand taking all these different pills. So we definitely, because we see different physicians and everybody has their own recommendations. But exactly to what you said, it can be overwhelming every day taking all of these pills. So I've heard it in my own home.
Yeah. Now, hormones, I want to just touch on hormones and body composition. We've been talking about it, but just being mindful of the time. We have a couple of minutes left. Hormones play a massive role in where and how we store fat. Estrogen in particular has been shown to influence fat distribution, muscle mass, and even appetite regulation. Now, with estrogen levels dropping during perimenopause and menopause, how does this shift impact body composition? And is there anything women can do to work with these changes instead of fighting against them?
So one, I'm still doing a lot of reading about what happens internally as to why this shift occurs. One of the things that may happen, I believe I read a study in rodent models, we actually have a change in estrogen receptor density to the abdominal region. So that would make sense. But again, I'm still early in this research. And in terms of what women can do, there's regardless if you're gaining weight or not, what we know is happening is your estrogen levels are declining. So to this, I would say you should at least consider estrogen therapy. Now, I'm not saying you have to go on it. That is a decision between the patient and her evidence-based physician. But what I found is a lot of women they just completely just say no, and they don't really have a good reason as to why they're saying no. And I struggled with this too. My wife went through menopause and had a very difficult time. And this was before I was devoting my career, my research to this area. I was very ignorant and had to do a lot of education. And one of the major things that I've learned, I wish we would have started my wife on hormone replacement therapy sooner. Now, again, that was our decision. I did all the scientific reading. We consulted with physicians. But I think what my general response is, if you're going to choose not to go on HRT, just have a reason as to why. Don't be fearful of it without having the appropriate conversations with your physician.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think a lot of women are misinformed. They hear HRT causes cancer. They hear all kinds of stuff that's just misinformed. And I think it really begins with speaking to a practitioner and to a physician that can really properly guide you. Experts like yourselves are not easily found. So I'm glad that we can blanket the voice here further than just your local practices. Dr. Daisy, I know you have some questions on the future of women's fitness.
Yes, Dr. Campbell. What are some emerging trends of fitness and nutrition research that excites you, and specifically around this time? Do you care to share with us?
Oh, I would love to. So right now, my research team and I, we're about to make this go live. It's actually the first menopause fitness survey. So when we sat down, I realized that, like, hey, I want to start getting some information. Thousands of studies on menopause. We even have quite a few studies now in women's fitness. But if you try to find a survey where you're merging women who've embraced a fitness lifestyle that are going through menopause, you won't find one published survey because it doesn't exist. So effectively, my lab is doing the first menopause fitness survey. So you have to be eligible for this, you have to be lifting weights, I think we said, for the previous 6 months. And we try to make this very open, such that anywhere from 35 to 75 years old, because we're going to get data on women as they perceive what will happen when they do go through menopause. Then we have this perimenopause group, like what's happening right now when you're going through it. And then we're getting reflections of women who are postmenopausal. What things did you experience when you were going through this? And we have a nutrition section and a very comprehensive fitness section, resistance training, cardio, and a hormone replacement therapy section. And then finally, a weight loss or body composition section. So that's what our survey is going to cover.
What? Sign me up.
I was going to say, Dr. Daisy, you are the perfect demographic for this.
Yes, I have some clientele here that will be gladly part of this, Dr. Campbell. So let me know how I can be of help.
That would, if you could spread the word, that would be great. Like I said, I've been doing research for 20 years, and the shift to take my skill set into this menopause transition population has given me so much new energy and excitement.
Wow. Well, we are officially out of time. I mean, this conversation could go on for another 30 minutes easily, and we can still keep chatting, as if we just started. So I thank you so much for coming on. It was really, really it was refreshing to see a male's perspective with such passion. So I thank you for coming on. Not only have you done the research, not only are you advocating for this particular community, but you're also making strides, and you're changing the narrative, which I love. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And really, we should thank my wife, because her experience is what opened my eyes. So unfortunately, it wasn't a good experience, but
thank you, Mrs. Campbell. Big shout out to Mrs. Campbell. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Campbell.
Thank you both.
For anyone who wants to dive deeper into Dr. Campbell's research, you can follow him on Instagram at Bill Campbell PhD, and you can check out his Body by Science research review at billcampbellphd.com. And of course, our amazing contributor, Dr. Daisy Ayim. Thank you always for lending your expertise. You can follow Dr. Daisy on Instagram at Dr. Daisy Ayim, and tune into her podcast, the Polished Beauty Podcast, for more insights. You could head to thepolishedbeautypodcast.com. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. We'll be right back after this. A Moment of Zen is brought to you by the Polished Beauty Podcast with Dr. Daisy Ayim. Hey, ambitious women, ready to shine on the inside and out? Tune in to the Polished Beauty Podcast, where we talk about business, beauty, brains, and body all in one spot. Meet Dr. Daisy Ayim, triple board certified cosmetic surgeon, pro-aging advocate, fitness enthusiast, and your go-to for real talk on leveling up every part of your life. The Polished Beauty Podcast is your dose of ambition meets empowerment. For more information, head to polishedbeautypodcast.com.